Welcome to our third parenting talk. Um, my name is Mike Camargo. I'm a mental health counselor and behavior analyst, and I'm joined by Amanda Dixon, who's also a mental health counselor and registered play therapist. And we are going to be talking to you about social media use. We'll talk about some of the benefits and challenges of it, as well as some things that you can do to, protect your kids, as well as, maintain better supervision over your children's use of social media. So why don't we get into it?
Sure. So when I think about introduction to social media, it feels like it's an important place to kind of start as far as people's exposure, families' exposure to social media, and some of the reasons that we might use social media, or our kids and teens might use social media. Right. One of the reasons we might engage in use of social media is for connection. Right. Think back to, I mean, even prior to the pandemic, but especially during the pandemic, really leaning on social media, virtual outlets as a way to really fulfill that connection need. As humans, right, we innately have a need for connection inherently. Without it, we would die essentially. And so being able to find it not only in person, but in ways that allow it to be more accessible, right? And so there's both a benefit and a drawback of having social media available because it really does allow for more flexibility around connection. However, that if we think again back to 20, 20, 30 years ago when social media really wasn't present, right, we'd be able to kind of end our kind of connection online, or not even online, but connection to people outside of our family essentially when we went home, right? So kids and teens, when they were done with school, would be able to go home and likely, unless they like made a phone call to their friends or were going out in the neighborhood, didn't really have that continuous connection. And so sort of a double-edged sword, and we'll talk more about that, but that inherently, right, social media helps to bring connection. And that's true for all of us or for any of us that use it. We want to think about the platforms that we engage in on social media, right? And being able, one of the things, especially as a caregiver, that's important is to have a sense of what new platforms are becoming available, right? So for a long time, I'm going to date myself here, but Facebook, for our generation, then we move in, or my generation and Mike's generation, I'd say, move into, the use of Snapchat, the use of now TikTok, Instagram, right? Having a sense of the different platforms that exist and kind of as a caregiver, being able to be out ahead of what those are, which for some of us, if we don't really use a lot of social media to begin with personally, right, that is going to be a learning curve. But really is important, at least if nothing else, have a sense of what those platforms are, what they do, how they may benefit or benefit your kid, or the drawbacks that may come from the utilization of them. And then obviously like communication, right? The importance of, and this goes hand in hand with connection, but this idea of really being able to make communicating with other people really at your fingertips, essentially, right? That we're really able to start a conversation kind of with whoever we want, or friends from school that we don't really get to see often, or people from work. And so again, benefit and a challenge in sort of how accessible that is.
Absolutely. And I think too, I mean, social media is a tool, right? And tools can be used to build up and tools can be used to destroy things, right? So, it's how we use it that really impacts the benefits or the impact that it has on us.
Absolutely. So some of the benefits of social media use, I mean, kind of talked a little bit about these in the last slide, but go a little more in depth here, right? That we're able to enhance communication and social connection, right? So for some people, let's say, um, the face-to-face socializing may be too much, right? Sometimes we may have a little of that, but like that then may fill a person's social cup, right? Or just enough. But the idea of being able to utilize social media or to text as opposed to having a face-to-face conversation, for some people may be more comfortable, right? I will argue, I think it's still important to be able to have a face-to-face conversation, of course, and to be able to make a phone call, right? But what I'm saying is that, like, the benefit here of increasing that communication and connection, may be able to meet people's needs in a different way than, like, again, when we had a rotary phone and texting or emailing wasn't an option. So it's really expanded out then to help meet other people's needs in different ways, to communicate in a way that works better for them, essentially. It helps to provide opportunities for creativity and self-expression, right? So again, when we think of the use of social media, how extensive what we're able to share with each other is, right? How much more connected, even just societally, we are in knowing sort of what different things are happening around the world. You think about, right, just also having news, right? There's news at your fingertips, how quickly we're able to know things now, again, compared to 30, 40 years ago, where that information really wasn't available, right, as quickly as it is. So when I say that, as far as just the creativity and self-expression, we're able to see more fruitfully, like, again, what other people are doing creatively in a self-expressive way. What kinds of things are they putting out into the world, and that we're able to kind of share in that creation and sort of the joy of whatever that is that they've created. And one of the things, actually, again, I think back to pandemic times, there were a lot of experiences of this where we saw people coming together, right, to sing together over Zoom or to chant together over Zoom. And again, a way to try and create community and also be able to connect on a creative wavelength that is really so healing and supportive in so many different ways. And so being able to accommodate that during a time where we were all just pulled away from each other, for the sake of our own safety and health. It can help foster learning through educational content, right? Again, this idea that there's so much information, not only news, but just generally information at our fingertips where, we really can learn just about anything, and learn about it to the point that, the amounts of information that we can acquire, right, can actually lead to mastery as far as, like, how much information we're really able to digest that exists out there in the world. And so, that it's really helpful in that way. And when we think about, kids or teens in school, the school obviously leans also on technology and aspects of technology really to help support and create a more fruitful learning environment. And so, I think that there's, again, benefits and drawbacks to that, but this idea that we're able also not only to learn, but also be able to support and teach others in what we know and what our sort of areas of expertise are. And the same goes for teens specifically, right? I think being able to share a lot of information kind of with the world potentially about what their experiences are, for good or bad, obviously, again, this could go either way, but the idea that I think sometimes knowing that we have somebody else who gets it or is experiencing similar things to us, again, just helps to enhance that ability to feel connected. It offers a platform for activism and raising awareness. So really gives us the opportunity to come together in mass, right? Even though it is virtual, we're really able to collaborate in a way, again, years ago, that would only have been able to be done in person, which is still obviously incredibly beneficial, but it really offers more opportunities for increased, like, activism and support for causes, essentially. So some of the risks of social media, like I said, it's kind of this double-edged sword where we have to look at both sides of things, right? Everything in my mind often exists in a kind of dichotomy or two-sided nature. And so we can't have the good without the bad, or the light without the dark. So talking about the risk of social media use, um, because there's so much more exposure to more people, right? And more people that either we know that a kid knows or doesn't know, that there's potential increase for bullying, right? Cyberbullying. So going back to that point that I made that, again, years ago when social media wasn't a thing, kids could go home and be free, right, of any exposure to people from school, right, or harmful people from school that were bullying them, to give a little bit of a reprieve. And now, what we see is kids don't really get that reprieve, adding to that additional, like, to that stress and the stress that they're experiencing from those interactions, as well as, potential exposure to online predators, depending on, and goes back to my point about why it's so important to know what platforms your kids are using, is, who are they being exposed to outside of like friends or family that they're talking to? Is it sort of a free-for-all where they're able to interact with strangers essentially in a very openly accessible way, right? That there's no one there to moderate. One of the things that I think of that more recently has come out is Roblox. A lot of kids play Roblox, and there's been a lot of information to come out more recently that some of the chat is unregulated, that there's some situations that really there have been people sort of in those chat rooms at times where saying things, luring kids, doing things that are incredibly inappropriate. And I think, again, if parents don't have that information, am I saying don't let your kids play Roblox? Not necessarily. What I am saying, though, is more awareness, again, to what that platform offers. Are there certain restrictions or things that you can put on sort of the use of that program to make it safer? And if there aren't, sort of as a family, right? And this is one of the things that I talk a lot with other families about that I work with is, your specific kind of digital social media diet is going to look different based on your family, and what your family's sort of expectations are, rules are. And so really getting some clarity on that for yourselves as caregivers around what do we want, like, what do we want to be open to our kids and what don't we want to be open to our kids? Where are the lines here around where the safety needs to be, where the sort of accessibility needs to be, and the flexibility with social media use? So obviously risk of inappropriate or harmful content, again, just outside of sort of communication with people, the fact, again, that the internet is such a vast array of so much information. There's a good chance, right? Sometimes if we don't have restrictions or certain controls in place, that if our kid goes to do a search for something, is there a potential of something harmful or inappropriate coming up? And so that consideration, right, around like your laptop or PC or cell phone, right, anywhere a kid would be searching the internet, again, thinking about what kind of controls can I set here to make it safe. The potential for addiction and overuse, and all these are important, but this one especially for kids and teens, because kids and teens brains are not developed, right? We know that brain development doesn't technically happen until the age of 27. And I think there's still some research and consideration for bumping that back even more. And so when we think about brain development and what use of technology is doing, we want to be very clear that, like, because the brain isn't fully developed, there is the potential there more often than not, actually, for addiction and overuse. And so I think my encouragement always for caregivers is to think about when you tell Johnny to get off his tablet and he resists and like freaks out, really considering the fact that his brain can't handle stopping unless, because I think I see sometimes what happens is parents will just expect their kid to naturally kind of get off the tablets or devices. The likelihood that is the exception and not the rule. Kids' brains are not made to effectively pull themselves away without some external support because of the way their brains function, right? So when we think about the way addiction works, which is like really tapping into this reward center of the brain. So kids, when they're doing this like screen-based things, is very much reward based for their brain. And why would they then be like, you know what, I'm going to step away from this? No, it feels good. It feels great, until they have to stop. And even that being said, right, obviously when we are the external forces that are being like, that are like, okay, 5 more minutes or time's up, they're likely going to struggle emotionally around that. And so just the acknowledgement, that the potential is there just based on the nature of how their brains are at this point in life. We have impact on mental health, such as anxiety, low self-esteem, right? That it's sometimes, again, kind of tying into that idea of addiction and overuse. Can be easy to get sucked into that cyclone of overusing, which doesn't help, kids or teens to feel better about themselves if they're not spending, time outdoors, time with other people in real life, with their family, with friends, doing things that they used to enjoy. If the focus really is solely on screens, they're missing out on a large part of life that really is going to help benefit their mental health, right? If they're not getting exercise, not eating properly, because it does become a pretty slippery slope sometimes, where there is such a reliance. And I know this is true for me too. I mean, like, let's be honest, as far as using technology and it is easy to be connected to my phone. It's easy to be on it as all the time, and there's a variety of different reasons for that. But that acknowledgement, I think for us as adults too, as far as like, what does our digital media kind of diet look like, and what messages and things are we modeling for our kids too? And if it feels like, what, I really need to kind of scale it down, how do I do that? Am I able to do that? And then how does that help to support shifts and changes, hopefully for my kid as well, in their use?
I think too, I mean, I think the increasing use of social media promotes depression as well. We have this like positive feedback loop of like, I feel depressed, so I zone out on social media and it makes me feel more depressed. I think the same with anxiety too. It's like I feel this way, have this negative emotion. I try to escape, and then it just causes me to feel that way more. And so it just kind of, feeds back on itself.
Absolutely.
Um, so let's talk about some guidelines that caregivers can use to kind of help their children, use social media in a more healthy manner. So like establishing rules, right, and boundaries, setting a schedule, um, limiting the content that they see. In terms of what they can post, or what posts that they're allowed to access. I think even just like how they engage with it, can be an ongoing discussion, with kids, so that they can learn, how to be healthy and positive stewards of their social media. Monitoring it. We're going to talk a little bit about this too in a little bit. Just strategies and apps that we can use to monitor um, our children's use of the internet. The internet has everything on it. And so, I know I have conversations with my son, who I don't know how he accesses certain, videos on YouTube, or YouTube Kids. And, we're having conversations about things that he sees, and that you can't always believe certain things. And, there's positive conversations too about how do you verify whether something is accurate, right? And the using commonly accepted or peer reviewed resources, right? So we've talked about using things like the New York Times, or using things like National Geographic, like these publications that are commonly held up as like a standard, that we would use them as what is the guideline for truth, as opposed to just what any random Joe is saying on his YouTube channel. And then also finding examples of that too. I found that helpful, of like finding examples of people saying things that, my children know are clearly not true. So it kind of proves that point of, you can't believe everything that you see or hear on the internet. And then also modeling and encouraging open communication about their experiences, you know, in a careful way, even sharing your own experiences, or things that you're concerned about, and then having conversations with them in a non-judgmental way, right? And so it's like, what are you experiencing? And trying to be aware as best you can that your kids may say things that are a little bit that are concerning to you about some of the things that they've may have experienced, but we want to be mindful about how we react because we don't want them to think that they've done something, wrong. Because perhaps it is wrong, but it's it's very correct for them to share it with you and for them to feel comfortable talking about it with you as well. I don't know if there's something you wanted to add, Amanda.
Um, no, I think that's good. Yeah.
Um, some other research shows too, like uh, establishing and maintaining positive relationships with your kids, just in general, can mitigate the negative impacts of social media, right? So having positive relationships with your kids creates motivation for them to want to spend more time with you. Having other activities for them to do that doesn't just involve, using their computer or using their iPad. Focusing on that open communication and sharing, and really just like focusing on the here and now, and that that in-person connection, um, and valuing it and encouraging your kids to have those connections with their friends and family outside of social media, I think is really important. Like Amanda, you mentioned before, like just the benefits of or the skill of being able to have a conversation on the phone, right? So often too, and I find myself doing it too, like wanting to text. It's so much easier, but so much is lost. And just picking up the phone and calling someone might seem a bit, nerve wracking at times, depending on the reason that you're having the call. But it's usually quicker, right? You get you get a lot more information in a much quicker time frame. But you're also able to like express yourself more effectively and create a better connection with people. So I find like, texting is really great for like a quick message. Hey, I'll be there in a few minutes. But having long drawn out conversations over text can really be detrimental to relationships. So encouraging the use of phones, encouraging phone calls, encouraging those in-person connections as much as possible, can really, decrease any of those negative impacts that we might experience from social media. And then for us too, as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, um, being knowledgeable and considering this idea of sharenting and how it impacts kids. So sharenting is basically the posting of pictures and content about our children, our grandchildren, without their permission, right? And honestly, like, I mean, I think of it myself, like, can your child really give permission for you to share their information or to share their picture because they don't truly understand what the impact of that is, whether it be, things that they might in the future find embarrassing, or even just, I've read things about like, posting pictures through the years of kids as they get older. It makes it much easier for people to, steal their image or predict what they might look like, in the future. And like with the advent of AI, right, and some of these video things that we've seen of like them making these videos and this content that looks very real but is absolutely not, is totally computer generated. We don't even know what kind of impacts that may have, in the future. And who knows in 5, 10 years how easy it might be for people to take an image of somebody and make a video about them doing or saying something that they didn't do.
Mhm.
Not that we're necessarily going to get away from, like, get rid of that. But I've often thought about, being careful and mindful about what I share of my children, because they really don't have a say, and they really don't know, what, the fact that it's out there for the whole world to see. Um, they don't understand that. So keeping that in mind, it doesn't mean don't share things, but it just means be mindful of what you are sharing. And would you want someone to share that about you, without your permission?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. Like you're saying, Mike, I think just the idea of like for me personally, I think with my kids, like less sharing is more, right? Because I do consider, I think it's important, right? The consideration around how is this going to be used? Can they even give consent to
Hmm.
it? And what's the purpose, right, behind my posting? I think that's also the question I think it's important for caregivers to ask is like, what's the motivation behind sharing all of these pictures or like kind of sharing a lot and often of my kids? Is it that my family is spread out all over the United States? Is there a better, different way as opposed to posting it to Instagram or Facebook, something that is still connecting to all of those people, but is more intimate in some ways? And so like just the considerations, I think really important.
And then also sharing with your family, right? So I may not be sharing, but grandparents may be sharing.
Right.
And
Yeah,
having those conversations with them and putting boundaries in place that you're comfortable with, for your kids.
absolutely. Uh, so also, thinking about digital footprint and online privacy, right? This idea, I mean, much like Mike and I have just been talking about, right? So if we're posting pictures of our kids on social media, kind of what is that, is that private? No, likely not. And kind of that's going to be out there, right, forever. And so the consideration and being able to teach our kids about that, right? We as adults can kind of potentially grasp and understand that, but really helping kids to understand that anything that you put out there is really going to be like imprinted in the world forever digitally. And right, that idea that anybody down the road can go look for this information and potentially find it, right? And so really being able to teach the concept of being very cautious about what you post and really thinking about, again, like the same questions that I think we should ask ourselves as caregivers of like, why is it that you want to post what you're posting? Who's your intended like the people that you want to see this? Is it appropriate? Right. And would you want this out there for the world to see for the rest of your life? um, and then also, right, going back to the point that I was making earlier, how are we as caregivers able to model healthy habits, which again can be very, very hard, especially if we're really connected to our devices and technology. And again, sometimes it's for a variety of different reasons. I know for me, like often use it a lot for work, but the acknowledgement that it's not always for work either, right? And so where is the line there around how to cut back on that, what that needs to look like, and then what my kids are going to see as a result of that? And how is that going to impact their relationship with media? And the hope is that it would, because we really are as caregivers, right? The models for everything, essentially, including digital habits.
We talked a bit too, like encouraging balance, right? Creating a schedule. I love schedules. I think that it allows us to put boundaries in place, expectations in place. It also helps keep people accountable, us accountable, them accountable. So like it doesn't mean you can never go on, and I think too for kids, like if it's not abstract and they don't really know, oh, you can do this later, that may create some anxiety. But hey, we're gonna be doing, you know, play outside and then have dinner and then take baths and then you'll have 30 minutes, or an hour on your device. Letting them know kind of like what the what to look forward to and like when to kind of expect it. And then putting those limits in place too of like not overindulging, um uh, using this technology.
Yeah. Um, and then I think also there was one thing that I was thinking as well, like just as far as with the balance piece, like just the recognition, I think, like for all of us, right, that we know that technology and social media in different ways is going to be a part of our lives, right? And so I think trying to figure out for our kids what our language is around the use of social media. Again, what are our expectations, limits, and boundaries? And how does that play out? Rather than also in my mind, I think the idea of like oh, you're never going to use any of that stuff, because what happens when they become an adult, right? The world is, for good or for better or worse, right, very much reliant on a lot of technology. And so, right, wouldn't we want to help kind of put money in the bank for our kids around navigating this in certain ways earlier on, as opposed to then, going off to college or something along those lines and having them to figure out, like, what do I do with this? Where do I begin?
So, I mean, one of the benefits too of technology is that there are apps and programs that we can use to monitor and control what our kids access. So this, I just quickly looked up a couple of things, in terms of what are some more of the more popular apps that people use. So Google Family Link, right? So you can attach it to, if you're using Google, um, and Google is in so many different apps and so many different programs. It really kind of allows you to in one have a central place where you can kind of control screen time limits, content limits. I know that YouTube Kids is an excellent. My kids will complain that, oh, that doesn't have everything that YouTube does. Okay, I will allow YouTube, but I really want to be there supervising what they're seeing so that we can kind of talk about it. But YouTube Kids is generally better, much better option for kids. But you can also put limits in place with that and kind of control the content that they see. Bark is another program. So it's an artificial intelligence program that monitors and looks for signs of bullying and signs of depression and what our kids are writing. So it can kind of give you a heads up as to what your kid may be experiencing that they may not perceive as a problem, or they are not comfortable telling you. And then I don't know how to pronounce MobiSip is another app that basically allows you to kind of put limits in place, screen time limits, content, kind of view what your kids are accessing, so that you can kind of stay up to date, on what it is that they're reading and seeing and learning. It's very overwhelming, right? I mean, as parents, we know, like, we can. I always feel like I could be doing more. I feel like I'm often not doing enough to kind of see what they're accessing, but it's a lot, right? And so, just the fact of like limiting their time kind of limits their exposure to this. But I agree with you, Amanda, like not cutting it out completely, because they need to learn how to, self monitor and control their own use for when they are, older and have more independence and freedom, um, to be able to kind of do that themselves and not feel like, oh, I can finally access everything and then go overboard in the other direction.
Absolutely. So some other resources are, which I love, Common Sense Media. They're a great resource. It's a website where you can go and search, a bunch of kind of information and about different media. So movies, video games, right? You put the names in, and it'll give you a good kind of breakdown. It'll give you a score of like where is this at, sort of on their ranking, and then we'll give kind of bullet points around, why this is a good sort of video game to play, why this isn't a good video game to play, what ages is it sort of suited for. So really, really great website, very kind of in-depth information. We have National Online Safety, so really give you information highlighting even further, what we've talked about tonight, but give some more details, some more references, and other connections to additional resources as well. Looking at, local community programs or workshops on digital safety. I actually think Onteora, I think I saw it on their website that they do have a digital safety program coming up soon, unless if it hasn't already passed. I would double check their calendar. I'm sure probably things went home as well to students, but I would double check that. And then parenting books and guides focused on technology. Obviously our libraries can be a really great source for being able to take books out on all different kinds of topics. And so being able to find books on upcoming technology, information, things that are going to be helpful for you to feel educated in this area. And obviously websites too, right? Websites around sort of the different formats of technology. Some tech-based websites could be helpful to get a sense of sort of what platforms are up and coming for teenagers and for kids. I mean, particularly teenagers, because I think that often sometimes there is a bit more freedom there, and a bit more opportunity for exploration, meaning that they find things before we find them or know about them, versus like a young kid where we may hopefully are monitoring more and there's less flexibility there. And so, trying to have kind of one step ahead. The best remedy for this, though, also is going back to what Mike said a few slides back, is the relationship that we have with our teen. That is going to be paramount over everything else, in that if they are going to be open, at least to some degree, to share with us what, maybe not what they're posting or like whatever, but like what they're using, what that's looking like, is going to be really helpful for us to help guide them and help support them, because teens need guidance and support too, obviously, right? Just because they're teens doesn't mean they're many adults. And so how are we able to align with them, support them, and have a sense of what's going on?
Just some closing thoughts for you, and we've touched on these, but social media is a part of our life. And balance is important. Teaching our kids how to, again, self-regulate their use of social media is a useful skill for them to learn, and better for us to be teaching it to them than for them to have to learn it on their own or not. Um, so it's okay to use this stuff, but let's teach them some limits, and teach them how to manage it, and also share our own difficulties with it as well, because we're all human. um we want to encourage our kids and their friends to use social media for the positive benefits of it, and try to avoid, which are often unavoidable at times, but avoid the pitfalls of it. And also teach them how to be good stewards and good online citizens. So, like, reporting things such as cyberbullying and not participating in it as well, which can be difficult, especially for young kids and teenagers, with regards to like peer pressure and wanting to fit in. Um, and I think, Amanda, you mentioned this before, like, 20 years ago, like, we would be at school, and we would be at school, and we didn't have this constant influx of information. So there are kids that, maybe bullied in school, and when we were growing up, we at least had the reprieve of going home and not experiencing it. And now it kind of can follow them around all day and be never ending. So we want to be aware of this. We want to talk to our kids about it, and kind of, protect them, and also, let other people know, whether it could very well be the school, other kids in school that are bullying your child, or your child, if your child is bullying another child. The school can be a good, go between. If you don't know who those kids' parents are, don't have contact with them, because the school can kind of figure out who it is, and they can, participate in that conversation, because while it may not happen in the school itself, it's definitely going to impact your child's um, ability to access their education.
Absolutely.
So that's what we have for you tonight. We hope this was helpful, and we hope that you'll join us for our next talk, which I believe is January. Is it 9th?
I think it sounds right.
It's January 9th, though. It'll be on the website.
Mm-hmm.
And we hope you have a good evening. And we'll see
Yeah,
you.
thank you for joining us.